Today, we're going to talk about 5 things that you should look for in every single contract and what every single contract most likely will have. And at the end of the video, I'm going to talk to you about one tip just to make your contract just a little bit better. Number 5. Okay, so 5. You want to make sure your contract has a date. Whether it's at the beginning or the end in the signature block, you want to make sure your contract has a date. The date is really important because it signals to the parties that the contract is effective normally on that date. There are retroactive contracts, but we're not going to get into that. But in general, the date on the contract is when the contract is effective. And this is important because if you're going to make a contract, both parties need to know, like, oh, I'm bound to this contract now on this particular date. And that's important. So make sure your contract has a date. If it doesn't have a date, make sure one's included. It's really important. Number 4. Okay, so number 4, you should have a signature. It should be the signature of the people who are actually a part or trying to be bound as a part of the contract. I know a little bit of jumbled, so basically all I'm saying is make sure you sign it and make sure the person who signs it is the person who actually, or company that you're actually trying to get into a contract with. Signatures are important because in some states or in some scenarios, a signature is required. If there's no signature, there ain't no contract. So make sure you get a signature just to be on the safe side. You can do a real signature or e-signature. Just make sure they put their John Hancock on it, okay? Number 3. I know, these are fun, right? Okay, so number 3 is a termination clause. Okay, so I can't tell you how many times I see a contract and there's no termination clause. So how do you know you have a termination clause? A termination clause can be really encompassing or very small. But the basics is if something happens or someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, or you just want to get out of the contract, this is what you have to do in order to get out of it. Termination clauses can include fines, they can include procedures, they include dates, they can include things that you have to do before you can even leave the contract. But no matter what it includes, you really need to make sure it has one. If it doesn't have one, go back to the drawing board. Both parties need to have an understanding that if something happens or if they want to get out or if there's a breach, there's a procedure or understanding in place about how to go about doing that. I think about your lease, right? When you sign a lease and they say, hey, you can't leave here without paying, fella, that's a termination clause. They say, oh, you have to pay 2 months. That's a fine for the termination clause. They're not saying you can't leave the lease, but you certainly gonna pay if you do. So think about that when you're thinking about whether or not your contract has a termination clause. Again, it can be super large or super small. Twos. We're on number 2. Okay, so we're talking about party names. Not like woo party, but party names meaning the people who are part of the contract. Party names. So anybody that you want to be a part of that contract, anybody that you want to be held to whatever you said in that contract, they need to be listed in the contract. Put their government, put the company's name, put the AKA, put the DBA, put their side hustle, put everything, okay? Put the names in the contract. If you think about what we said in number 4, in the signature, it's going to be whoever is bound to the contract. So if you have someone signing the contract and they're not listed in the contract as a party name, there's a problem there. There's a disconnect. There's a disagreement. So make sure that everybody that you want in the contract is named in the contract. And make sure that even if it's a company, that if it's a representative or a CEO or someone else signing the contract, make sure their name is listed in the party names. We don't want no confusion. Okay? Okay. So the number 1 is terms of agreement. Okay? If you don't have the terms of agreement, you really don't have no contract. The terms of agreement basically state what both parties agree to do in some sense. The most easy example is I agree to sell you 500 shirts. You agree to pay me $1,000. The terms of agreement could be just that. But if you're making a contract, you want to get more details sometimes. Sometimes you want to talk about delivery schedule, how long the contract is going to be, how often the payments are going to be. These are terms of agreement. If ever in doubt, make sure you read the terms of agreement above almost everything else, because that is really what's binding you. All right, so let's go from the top. You have number 5. Make sure you have a date, right? Make sure you have a date. Number 4, make sure that there are signatures on the contract. And the signatures are the signatures of the people who are actually bound to the contract. Number 3, make sure you read and have a valid, enforceable, and understandable termination clause. Number 2, make sure all the party names, everybody, is in the contract. And number 1, make sure you have a concise understanding of the terms of agreements or what is actually being agreed upon in the contract. So those are the 5 things that every contract should have. I promised you a tip, right? Okay, so the tip goes to terms of agreement. So for our tip, if you're creating a contract yourself, or you have someone else make it for you, or you're reading one, aka if you have a contract, and you're trying to figure out if the term of agreements is really clear, get someone who has nothing to do with the contract to read the contract. Just read the terms of agreement articles, and then if they ask you any questions, or they have any concerns, or they don't understand anything, put those answers in the contract. That's how you know if your terms of agreement are really clear. And that's just a tip from me. I want to hear from you. Have you ever signed or created a contract or been a part of a contract that didn't have these 5 things? Sound off below. We would love for you to be a part of our community. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook at JBook Consulting. All right, deal makers. Until next time, this is Jessica. Make sure you read those contracts.